Welcome to our Housing Ombudsman podcast today. I'm Victoria King, Sector Learning and Development Lead here at the Housing Ombudsman Service, and we're here to talk about damp and mould. And we're going to be talking a lot today about our original Spotlight report on damp and mould. So that was released in autumn 2021. And we're also going to be talking about our follow-up report, which was released in February 2023. So I'm joined today by Zoe Miller, one of our Insight and Systemic Managers here at the Housing Ombudsman. Zoe wrote the Spotlight Damp and Mould follow-up report, and I'm also joined by Paul Miller, our Policy and Parliamentary Lead. So Zoe, would you like to introduce yourself and then pass on to Paul?
Yes, thank you. I'm Zoe Miller. I'm one of our Insight and Systemic Managers here at the Housing Ombudsman. I work in the Insight and Development team, and one of the things that we do is we produce our Spotlight reports and follow-up reports, so our thematic investigations. And I'll hand you over to Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul, no relation to Zoe. I work in the communications team, and my role as Policy and Parliamentary Lead is to ensure these reports have impact and to engage with MPs and councillors.
Thank you very much. The Millers, spelt in different way, not related, but we've got the Millers today. So thank you very much for joining us. So I'm very pleased to welcome on the podcast today, we're going to be talking to Councillor Matthew McCabe, Cabinet Member for the Built Environment, Housing and Sustainable Development at Bath and North East Somerset Council, or BANES. And we've also got Debbie Freeman at Bath and North East Somerset Council. And we're going to be talking about the council's health and housing damp and mould project. So the project is a collaboration between housing services and public health, developed in partnership with the providers of social housing in BANES in the Somerset area. So first up, Councillor McCabe, would you like to introduce yourself and then hand over to Debbie?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Councillor Matt McCabe. As you say, I'm the Cabinet Member for the Built Environment, Housing and Sustainable Development, which is essentially planning and housing at Bath and North East Somerset Council. And the portfolio includes housing services. And as one of our priorities is to improve people's lives, that includes focusing on healthier lives and places. Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Freeman. I'm part of the Housing Enabling and Development team at Bath and North East Somerset, and I deliver the empty property service as my sort of main job. But I was very inspired by the Spotlight report and the follow-up report, and developed and managed the Health and Housing Damp and Mould project with our public health colleagues.
Thank you both. So I think I'm asking the first question. So we're here to talk about your damp and mould charter, but this was just one part of the overarching damp and mould project. Would you like to tell us about the project and the deliverables on the project?
Yeah, the damp and mould project followed on from work already done by the Housing Standards and Public Health team, which aimed to ensure private landlords are aware of their responsibilities and tenants are aware of their rights in relation to damp and mould issues. And we wanted to extend this work to include the providers of social housing and their tenants.
Project began in April 2023 and ran until March 2024. And it had the overarching aim was to create consistency in the action being taken by our registered providers in the area when tackling damp and mould in their properties. So by supporting them to meet the 26 recommendations in the Spotlight report, this was about using the recommendations to support the consistent approach to damp and mould and securing their engagement in implementing these recommendations.
Yeah, so there's around 30 RPs operating in Bath and North East Somerset, including the council, collectively providing close to 12,000 units of social housing. 77% of the stock is held by one provider, with the remaining stock spread over the rest. So the majority of our providers own 1,000 plus units nationally, so come under the regulator of social housing, and are obliged to provide evidence that they're meeting the decent homes standards. The providers not holding 1,000 units are effectively unregulated, suggested that there is a place for the local authority to encourage these providers to engage with the Ombudsman's recommendations and to support the sector-wide culture change in preventing and dealing with damp and mould issues. So the local authority has an important enforcement role, and the project was designed to complement this through support and coordination.
The project had 3 deliverables. Number 1, to develop a landlord's conditions and standards forum. Number 2 was to compile a damp and mould resource library. And number 3 was to create the damp and mould charter. So looking at number 1, the forum, there had been some prior consultation with RPs, and it had become apparent that all bar one of the existing landlord forums was solely development focused. So there was clearly the need for a space for RPs to discuss housing conditions and public health concerns.
So, and the West of England Combined Authority are now exploring options for establishing a regional forum for landlords to discuss housing conditions and public health related concerns. Once established, the forum will be open to providers of social housing in Bristol, Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. So this will provide us with an excellent opportunity to identify public health, housing needs and support preventative action and the sharing of good practice.
And the Damp and Mould Resource Library, this is a collection of best practice examples and agreed recommendations, and this will be housed on the council's public website alongside the charter. The RPs were all invited to submit examples of their damp and mould resources like staff training, tenant advice, their policies and procedures, and they were all collated in the resource library. And then we're going to discuss the damp and mould charter now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so much. It's really, really interesting, and obviously so much work has clearly gone into this. Could you tell me a little bit more about, or tell us a little bit more about sort of the overarching aims of the damp and mould charter and why you felt the charter, doing a charter was the right approach?
I think a charter supports the wider project aims of ensuring equity in the outcomes for tenants, regardless of which provider they're housed with, and the prevention of a postcode lottery regarding the level of risk to which tenants are exposed and the support they receive. So the charter establishes a common standard of approach and a set of principles for dealing with damp and mould, which all the RPs operating in Bath and North East Somerset have been invited to sign up to.
Yeah, so a charter felt like the right approach because there's no financial implications for landlords or the council, and just like the Ombudsman's recommendations, there is no legal obligation to engage, but there is the central assumption that all partners want to ensure good outcomes for tenants. So signing the charter demonstrates this, and the whole project, in fact, was a massive piece of partnership working, which involved getting partners on board without any type of incentive over and above, obviously, doing the right thing. And there was no threat of enforcement.
And the charter's been really positive, but we acknowledge it's only part of the solution. As such, the council continues to take enforcement action against landlords, both private and social, where damp and mould hazards that have not been promptly rectified.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you both. And so I'm really interested in how you identified the partners you needed to work with and then how you did work with them.
So I obtained the list of all our providers in Bath and North East Somerset from the 2021-22 statistical data return, and I contacted them going in at chief executive level with a project proposal. I then invited them to nominate someone from the organisation to engage with the project. These nominees were a total range from heads of customer service all the way up to chief exec. And I mentioned the pre-existing housing forum that I found, which didn't just focus on development. It proved to be really useful because the chair of this forum agreed that I could have a standing agenda item for the lifespan of the project. So I sent invites to all our RPs, asking them to join the attendance list. And then I used the slot at this forum to pull together a task and finish group to be my project development group. And I provided project updates and so on.
Thank you both very much. So the charter, the Damp and Mould Charter, establishes a set of 5 principles that landlords will use to inform their approach to damp and mould in their housing stock. What are these 5 principles, and why did you choose those 5 principles?
So the 5 principles in the charter are based on the 26 recommendations in the Spotlight report. So I used the headings from the report that they were provided, and I condensed the recommendations into a sort of summary of the culture change that's needed in working practice. So the principles are, number 1, foster a zero tolerance culture to damp and mould. This means ensuring that damp and mould prevention and intervention is prioritised through implementing or developing a dedicated damp and mould strategy or policy. This would set out how damp and mould issues will be identified and monitored, how staff will be trained on dealing quickly, empathically and knowledgeably with reports of damp and mould, and the range of interventions that can be used. Number 2, move from a reactive to a proactive approach. To move from taking a reactive approach to dealing with reports of damp and mould to a proactive one, which actively invites reports and feedback and provides a quick, efficient process for resolving issues that is also open, transparent and accessible to all residents. Number 3, take responsibility. To build on the principle of taking a proactive approach by ensuring we fully accept our responsibilities as landlords, seeking always to explore how we can prevent, detect and address issues. We will not infer blame on tenant lifestyle, but instead we'll take steps to know, listen to and work with tenants, ensuring communication and advice around damp and mould is accurate, appropriate and fair. Number 4, focus on the fabric of the property. In the investigation of damp and mould reports, we will shift emphasis away from occupational factors like cooking practices and towards the fabric of the property itself, including affordable warmth options for tenants. We will invest in proactive measures to identify inherent or structural factors that lead to homes being more susceptible to damp and mould. And then lastly, number 5 is legal and statutory compliance. Ensure knowledge of and compliance with all legal and regulatory duties, including but not limited to those set out in the Housing and Regeneration Act 2008, as amended by the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023.
Thank you, Debbie. So you talk about sharing best practice and engaging in discussions about how you can deliver on the Ombudsman's recommendations. How are you working with those who signed up to the Charter to do this, and what benefits are you seeing of doing this?
So firstly, is the creation of the Regional Housing Conditions Forum that we mentioned. Which that will facilitate discussion and the opportunity for peer-to-peer support and collaboration. And then we've got the Damp and Mould Resource Library, which will enable sharing of best practice examples and more general resources, which will support the RP's work on damp and mould. So a limitation of the project is that there's only capacity to monitor outcomes through proxy indicators of engagement. So this is by monitoring how many RPs sign up to the Charter, how many engage with the regional forum once it's established, and whether it becomes an effective forum for supporting action on damp and mould. So I guess time will tell.
Unsurprisingly, I have a question for you around the damp and mould follow-up report that we published in February in 2023. Was there anything in that report that surprised you at all?
Yes. So the notable proportion of landlords that you found who were unaware of the Spotlight report's publication surprised me. It just appeared to be incredibly well publicised to me. Also, at first, the landlord response figures published in the follow-up report seemed perhaps lower than I would expect. And I was wondering if this would be sort of mirrored by the uptake of the charter. However, 29 invitations to sign were sent out in March, and to date, we already have 15 signatories, and hopefully this number will continue to slowly rise. There's no deadline or cut-off for signing up.
Well, that's really good to hear. Thank you. And let's hope that continues to increase. And now's your chance to say why you think providers of social housing in Bath and North East Somerset should sign up to the Charter, and also a bit about how they can sign up.
Well, I think we'd like to believe that everyone working in housing provision wants to achieve the best outcome for tenants that we possibly can. The Charter is a public acknowledgement that industry-wide culture change regarding damp and mould is needed, and a commitment to revising and improving existing approaches to reflect this. So in March, the invitation to sign email was sent by the Council's Director of Sustainable Communities with an online form that populates the Charter. And then the following month, we send a follow-up reminder, and providers then have a link in the email to sign up at any time. So there's no deadline or cut-off.
Well, thanks for that. So what ultimately have you learned through the process of establishing the Charter, and have there been any barriers or challenges along the way?
So as I alluded to earlier, there was no budget for the project. So engagement was based entirely on goodwill and persistence, which can be challenging. So ascertaining the best person to contact with the right level of seniority, then getting their contact details and engaging them is absolutely key. And we didn't have a complete or up-to-date contacts list for our RPs. So I had to put that together, but now we have one. While the majority of RPs engaged fully with the project, others wanted to participate at varying degrees or not at all. So the reasons for this varied. There were a couple I received no response from. Another chose not to engage with the project, and that's because they provide extra care housing. So units were entered daily by staff, meaning that issues of damp and mould were identified and dealt with before they became a problem. And then there was others that were in the process of actually disposing of their units in Bath and North East Somerset. So they felt it wasn't appropriate. But also, the Charter could feel like an admission of organisational failing. So you'll find that reassurance was needed in some cases that this work is about supporting good practice rather than penalising providers.
Yeah, really important point. I mean, just following on as well from Zoe's last question, what advice do you have for those who are thinking about setting up something similar within their areas, within their local authorities?
So yeah, as I said, it's obtaining the contact details for the right officers to get round the table is surprisingly challenging, and it may take longer than you expect. So I would advise allowing time for this at the beginning when you're planning out your timescales for the project. It's important that you get buy-in from the people with the right level of seniority in order to get the charter signed. And I would recommend housing colleagues who are sort of involved in standards and conditions find out who their council's consultant in public health lead is for wider determinants of health. And then you link in with them and you can explore opportunities for joint preventative and proactive work on housing and health.
Engagement with these projects is based on goodwill and dependent on landlords seeing the value in partnership working. So collaboration is key. So set up a task and finish group with willing RP representatives as early in the project as possible. It also helps as a local authority when you've got a really talented and effective officer like Debbie, and she was able to set this up, and it meant that everything was done in collaboration with our RP partners, and that the ask of them was therefore proportionate with their ability to deliver.
Well, that brings us to the end of all of our questions. Debbie and Matthew, thank you so much for your time today to discuss the project and the charter. If you would, those listening, you would like to find out more about the charter, it's available via the Bath and North East Somerset Council website, and I'll also include the link to that in our show notes. So just to say thank you very much for coming on today to talk about
Thank you.
the charter. It's been really, really fascinating. Thank you both, and thank you to Zoe and Paul as well for helping me out with the questions today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.